Hey everybody, it's Chamberman, and I am with Scott Diener today. He is a current Port Orchard City Council person, and he is in position number 3. He is running for re-election this year. And Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for everything that you've done for the community so far and being on the City Council. Quite frankly, why anybody would want to be a politician is beyond me. So kudos to you. So I've got, we have a series of questions here that we're gonna kind of jump into, and you know, in the final edited version, we will bounce back and forth between you and Heidi, right? You're running against Heidi?
That's correct.
Okay, so Heidi Fenton will be on here for the second half of the of each question, and so we'll just go ahead and get started. And this is not you know, this isn't for an endorsement or anything like that. This is just so that we can figure out who Scott is. If you don't know Scott, and that's why we can start out with Scott. You know, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you decided to run for City Council, and how do you think you can help the community? So I guess that's kind of like 3 questions. So I cheated that way. I can say there's 6 questions, but each question, you know, it's all these different parts. So who are you? Why you're running, and how do you think you can help?
Okay. So I moved to Port Orchard in 2005. My wife and I had been abroad, and we decided that Port Orchard was a good landing spot. And we arrived. My wife was pregnant, and now I have 2 kids in high school here. And that's been quite an experience because, you know, well, the pandemic has really shaped that experience so far, plus just the high school itself and all that goes into being a high schooler there and so on. But one of the things that, well, several of the things actually that I like about where I live is Port Orchard's character, its charm, really. It has a lot to offer. And also, I think its location couldn't be more ideal for me anyways, because you can go east or west and recreate. If you want snow or you want to go skiing, you can do that. If you want to go hiking in the mountains or go play on lakes or in the water, you can do that. Really, it's really an accessible area. And then if you want to go to Tacoma or Seattle and have a crazy night and then come back, you can do that. And it's one of the things that I think makes Port Orchard's location just so great. I live close to downtown. I frequent downtown quite a bit. I'm walking on the pathways quite a bit. I use our parks. My wife and I and the kids, we visit the local establishments and the businesses. And we really, really like what Port Orchard has to offer. And it's a place that is going to be showing its best in the next several years. And I can talk more about that later with, I guess, with the right question. But the reason I got involved was when St. Vincent's was torn down and Bruce Titus Ford opened up on the waterfront. And I actually was really surprised that we had zoning code that allowed for that. And so I talked to planning commissioners and at that point it was really too late. Once they had their application in, they were vested, there was nothing you could do about it. But for me, having an auto dealership on our waterfront was a very interesting choice in our zoning code. And so that's what motivated me to apply for the vacant second half of Rob Putanzo's term when he was elected as mayor. The other thing that struck me was I had an uncle who lived in San Diego, and he would come and visit. And he remarked once when he walked downtown that if you didn't know Port Orchard was on the waterfront, you wouldn't know it was on the waterfront. And he's half joking, but you know, I thought about that, and it's caused me to remark that we have the best waterfront parking in the world. And should we have the best waterfront parking in the world? Should we look to try and maybe expand some green space so you can spread out and throw a Frisbee or you know, do more than what we currently offer down there? And so that's been something that I've been thinking about, that's been in the back of my mind. And so those are the reasons that motivated me is to really take a look at sort of the land use components. And having been in land use for 30 years, one of the things that's interesting to note is it's typically land use that brings people out to testify either for or against something. And it's quite often a new development that's happening next door that nobody expected or the realtor told them would never happen. And so going to your third question about what I can bring to the table, it's 30 years of planning communities that I can bring to the table. I've presented to policymakers, council members, and commissioners for 30 years. And now for the last 6 years, I've been on the other side of the aisle, listening to staff recommendations and helping to make decisions there. And I understand the rules by which we must engage, by which we must operate under the law. And I feel I have a really good grasp of those fundamental issues.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Port Orchard since 2005.
Yeah.
That's nice. And this afternoon, I am with Heidi Fenton. She is running for position number 3 in the City of Port Orchard City Council race. Good morning, I guess good afternoon, Heidi. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good, and thank you for having me.
Good. Well, thank you for joining me. Thank you for stepping up and throwing your hat into the ring. I know that not everybody's cut out to be a politician, and it takes a special person. And so thank you for taking that jump and that leap. So
You're welcome.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to, ask Heidi the questions, and then I'll have Scott Diener on and ask him questions, and I'll splice them all together. So kind of bear with us here as we go through this process. And so we're just going to jump right on into the first question for Heidi. So Heidi, your first question is, and it's probably the toughest one, is, why have you decided to run for the city, Port Orchard City Council, and how do you think you can best help the community?
Okay, great question. Well, why I'm running is because, I've been a resident here for 24 years and been a part of Port Orchard and the community, helping out or being a volunteer. And then also I've been to some of the city council meetings. And number one reason why I'm running, because I really feel there's a lack of communication between the constituents, the community, and city council. And I want to bring back more of involvement, more to really acknowledge people's voices, and also have more accessibility for when it comes to communicating to the city council. I feel that our community, it's a great community, but people get busy and things happen, and then they kind of forget about city council. And I think there could be a great connection between people and city council. And that is, there's other reasons, but that is one that I really wanted to focus on, is communication. And what was that other question?
Well, just how do you think you can help the community?
Oh, okay. Oh, I can help the community by bringing us together, by working with the small businesses and just the people downtown. And also, I think communication could be, there's this thing that the Public Works has, and it's called Click Fix. And it's a great tool where the public can say something and you get immediate feedback. And I would like more of a communication that you can get quick feedback when it comes to people asking questions or, getting involved, or if it's positive or they want to change. I think that's a good way for communication. But I think too, just to advocate needs that our city needs. I think I could be right there, helping out and being involved.
All right, thank you. That's nice. So next question has to do with growth, and you talked about land use and things like that. And so growth is inevitable. How do you feel about the growth that is taking place here in South Kitsap, in Port Orchard? Do you support additional development in the city? And specifically, what does responsible development look like?
It's a very good question. And, everybody has a different answer for what that looks like, and what should our growth look like? It's a multifaceted question, and with different answers. So the first thing, I'll just right out of the gate, I'll say that the city is impacted by growth that's occurring outside of its city boundaries. In the urban growth area and some of the more immediate rural areas, we have a population that's just as large as the cities. And yet those people are typically coming into the city and impacting its infrastructure, its roads. And so we feel that. there is no way to stop growth. It just cannot legally be done. The state requires you to plan for it. So the alternative to, an infeasible stoppage of growth is to manage the growth. And we can do that several different ways. We can do that through our zoning codes. We can do that through density allowances by zoning designations. We can do that by what we call sub-area planning, or what many people know as neighborhood planning. And when I talk about these things, I like to give examples just to show that I'm not just talking the talk, but I'm also walking it too. So for example, the Ruby Creek sub-area plan is a neighborhood plan that's at the Sedney-Sidgwick intersection. That's kind of the main focus of that area. And you can see that there is a mixed use development going in there. I think the foundations have been poured for that, in fact. And that will bring along with it what we call a complete streets profile. There'll be sidewalks, there'll be bike lanes, there'll be a travel lane, a turn lane, and then same on the other side of that. So what we call a complete streets profile. That's an example of how you can manage growth. The proposed development there and what the neighborhood plan really encourages is mixed use development. And as many people understand, with mixed use development comes dining services, personal services, things that people are able to access without having to get in their car and drive somewhere. And so that has a real positive impact in a number of different ways. It keeps people off the streets, off our roads. So, less potholes, less impacts to our pavement. And it also helps people with car ownership, which can, for many people, is a major expense. Maybe you don't need to own a car. Maybe you need just to own a bicycle with some racks, and you're good to go for shopping down the street. So those kinds of neighborhood plans really have a positive impact. We're looking at a couple of those. There's one out in McCormick Village that will promote mixed use development with a diverse set of housing types to promote affordable housing. So those are some examples. We have other sub-area plans that we're going to be looking at. And then I want to circle back to kind of growth and how we handle that. Every 8 years, we are required under the Growth Management Act to comprehensive plan the county and all of its cities. Leading up to that is a population allocation that the Office of Financial Management allocates to the county and the cities. And they do that, they figure out that number by just looking at trends and then trending forward for 20 years. And at that time, through the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, the cities and the county will start horse trading population numbers. And we already know that Bainbridge is a no growth council. I know from my experience that Kingston would prefer, most people in Kingston would prefer not to see growth. Paulsbo has talked about wanting growth, but they've not expanded their city limits in the 15 years I've been here. Bremerton will take its share of growth, and the county will kind of have a mixed bag about that, but they'll generally do what's right. But what I'm concerned about is having growth shoved our way, because on paper, through a technical report called the Buildable Lands Analysis, we have the land supply for additional growth beyond what we should be allocated, the minimum allocation. I, as a council member, and I think others agree with me, don't believe that we should be taking on more growth than the other communities and their prorated share. I think that what that means to us is that we're going to continue to see increased impacts on traffic. That's how we feel the growth really is, just by driving around. And so through that population allocation and comprehensive planning, we're going to push back as best we can to make sure that we take what's appropriate for our growth and not any more. We take more, that's just a quicker degradation of our and impacts on our infrastructure and our roads that we need to figure out how to manage. And so those are a couple of it's a pretty technical planning process, but that's most of, I think, of the answers. Did I miss anything out of the question?
I think you're good, because you hit that magic I don't know how many letter word it is, but infrastructure.
Yeah.
And infrastructure is the next question. So you kind of dovetailed into that. So question number 2, Heidi, is growth is inevitable. How do you feel about growth that is taking place in South Kitsap and Port Orchard? And do you support additional development in the city? And specifically, what does reasonable development look like to you?
Okay, well, let's start off with that last question. And the reasonable development is making sure that we are fiscally responsible. Not that we're going to be just we just want to get to the future and build big stuff, or we're not concentrating what we should concentrate on right now. And I believe in development and commercial development, but we have to make sure we taper it with what's growing with the people and how we're going forward. I mean, we got the infrastructure needs to accommodate our growth with roads, waste management, power supplies. I mean, schools, like out in the McCormick Woods way out there, houses are booming. We need, for our traffic and another school out there. We're going to have so many kids. And then we need, for police and fire. So I feel we need responsible, that we're keeping up with it money wise. And I know that we are growing, and I want to be a supporter, especially downtown. And I'm not sure if you're going to ask the question on the community center or and I think that's good, but I also want to have more involvement with the citizens and the constituents and just the business people and just the community. Let's get back together, because those plans are changing. And the city bought the bank, and also I know our taxpayers' dollars will be going to that. And I want to see how those plans have changed. So I know that's a big deal down there.
That infrastructure is critical to the growth and development of a community, and you just touched on some of those things. And if you have to repeat yourself on part of this answer, that's fine. But how would you best handle the growing infrastructure needs in the city and the impacts of the increased population?
That's another good question, and you're right. It's part and parcel with growth. We are fortunate that we have gotten better in managing our capital infrastructure and our enterprise funds over time. I can't say that I understood that to be the case many years ago. But with respect to, and I'll just start with roads. We've got tens of millions of dollars of road improvements that we need. And that doesn't include what the state should be doing with Sedgwick and their highway from 16 all the way out to Southwood. We've got to get them to pony up and pull their weight. But we have a lot of road planning and transportation planning and traffic projects that we need to get done. I sit on a transportation committee where we talk about how we prioritize that so that we can best leverage ourselves for lobbying, for awards, for grant funding. And it's very competitive. I mean, all the money that we need, so does Paulsboro, so does Bremerton. So we're competing with these other jurisdictions. And it really helps to have, good mayor, good lobbying firms. And we've done well in that area. With the KRCC, Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, and how they allocate, how transportation dollars are allocated, it's kind of like with Tremont, you get your award, and then really there's generally kind of an equity component where then, okay, now it's Paulsboro's turn, and okay, now it's Bainbridge Island's turn, although they turned away a recent award because it would have helped with growth and they didn't want that. So we've got to remember that there's this equity to transportation improvements. And really, I circle back to a previous answer. We feel probably traffic more than any other infrastructure demand just by driving around. If you're at Albertsons over by Lowe's and you want to go to Lowe's at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, it'll take you 15 minutes to go 0.2 of a mile, and it's just crazy. So that's one infrastructure demand. The other is water and sewer. We really have done a better job in managing those enterprise funds so that the ratepayers aren't having to subsidize out of pocket. And part of that has been a right sizing of impact fees for development. Impact fees are a fee that a developer will pay for roads, fire, schools, and parks. And a couple years ago, that was adjusted. That is essentially a requirement under the Growth Management Act that development pay its way. Now it's a bit of a catch-22. Yes, the development pays those impact fees. They have to in order to complete the development. But then they pass on much of those costs to the buyer. And so, you know, that circles or intersects with the affordable housing issues. The other thing that we recently did is we looked at our capital facility fees or charges for new development, and we adjusted that. And we adjusted that just like we did with impact fees, using metrics and data to support the decisions that were made, so that developers are paying for their future impacts on infrastructure through a prorated share of the anticipated lifespan of that infrastructure, so that current ratepayers are not having to subsidize that new development's impact on water and sewer infrastructure. So those are really important steps that have been made. We've implemented those recently in some McCormick Woods future developments. You know, I'll just say that when McCormick Woods was annexed, nobody had any idea of the dozens upon dozens of lots that were going to be brought in alongside that annexation that now are legally entitled to be vested. So, you know, there's a lot going on, but about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I guess it was, we finally fixed all the miscellaneous and many different agreements with McCormick Woods and its infrastructure approach to development. And so that was a real heavy lift, a lot of legal review. We got there. And so that heavy lift for that part of town has been satisfied. And that helped us get kind of caught up with much of our infrastructure demand issues.
All right, thank you, Scott. So Heidi, the next question, and you did touch on it a little bit, is on infrastructure. Infrastructure is critical to the growth and development of a community. How would you best handle the growing infrastructure needs in the city and the impacts of the increased population?
Yeah, well, you definitely got to get together and see what that growth plan is and map it out for the future, and especially being fiscally responsible with that growth. And, you know, you got numbers for how many people, you know, projecting that are going to be coming to our city. And you just really got to plan it out and look at the numbers and see, okay, what's the capacity that we are going to entail for now and for the future as we get more houses in and, you know, more businesses. And I think that's, you know, you got to get together, you know, with a group, and you really need to plan this out and have the community say, hey, what about the constituents? Or, you know, say, we're going to have this plan, and we want more of the community to get involved. We want professionals to get involved. And, you know, it's a lot, because I talked about the roads and the waste management and power supply. I mean, there's a lot to go in with, you know, planning for the city and for, you know, Port Orchard here, and especially the roads. That's, you know, high traffic, that is going to impact us. And I don't know if I answered all that, but I could say some more if you want me to keep going.
Nope, that's okay. That's good. That's good. Okay. All right. So now we're gonna shift gears a little bit, and we're gonna talk about businesses. We are the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce, and so the first question on business is, what impact or influence do you think the city has on local businesses here in South Kitsap and Port Orchard?
Oh, I think it can have a tremendous impact on business. A couple different ways. Probably the most direct impact is with its zoning code. We've got to have, I apologize. We've got to have zoning code that kind of gets out of the way of the vision of an area that those people want. So downtown is usually the best or most talked about. And, you know, over the many years, and I think I was on the tail end of one of those efforts, there's been visioning for downtown. And so it's been really important that code has been developed and improved, even somewhat recently, to support the vision of downtown. Now, once you have code that supports that with the right kinds of uses, the right kinds of density, the right kinds of parking requirements, then you've got to look at what are the other barriers that you want to make sure you address. And for me, a lot of that comes down to permitting. What is required to get something done? What's required to do a facelift that requires a building permit, for example, or cosmetic improvements that require building permits, or a brand new building permit for a structure? I've always believed that building permit should really be paying for the time that goes into that and nothing more. There are, some minor exceptions to that, technology fees, administrative processing fees, those kinds of things. But generally you want fees that are commensurate with the staff level going into that review. And to make sure that those fees are right sized, you also want to make sure that you have the most efficient and effective review going into permitting, so that you're not being wasteful in creating a waste stream of review where people are now paying for what most people would call red tape or classic bureaucracy. The city uses SmartGov, which is a very metric and data oriented land information system application. And so they've got the information that they need to look at how much time is going into applications, and they can adjust their fees as needed for that. So, I boil it down to making sure that we have good codes and we have good permitting and that it's not wasteful. I've talked with some people. I've doorbelled over 1,600 homes. I think it's about 1,624 homes. And I've doorbelled on some of the businesses. And a couple of the things that have come up are permitting, sign permits. How those can be so small in nature, but rather kind of extravagant in their fees. And so that's something that I actually plan on talking about. The other thing is having a conversation with the business community. What is it that you believe we can do, what the city can do, and making sure that people understand the good policy role for the city and what it is able to do without crossing lines, gifting funds, those kinds of things. And so making sure that the business community understands the city's role, and then having that dialogue about what's broken, what can we do? The other night at work study, for example, we talked about contributing money to the Small Business Development Center, which I believe is managed by Western Washington University. And so that's $10,000 that goes towards a website that will help businesses with toolkits and connections. And Matt, you know more about that than I. So could you repeat the question?
No, I don't think so, because I think you got most of it.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. Yep.
Good. Yeah, it's having an active dialogue and having it regularly too. Not just let's check in once a year and see what's working and what's not.
Right. Yeah. And so, and you did touch on a little bit of the next question. So, they kind of dovetail when you talk about codes and the regulations. My next question deals with that. And so the next question for you, and being is that we are the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce, and what impact or influence do you think the city has on local businesses here in Port Orchard and South Kitsap?
Oh, I'm such a supporter for the small businesses, and even, for what you guys do, the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce, and all the groups that come together. They make our community so much better and enrich it, and just bring a lot of different activities. And so I think with all those groups coming together and city council just to support the downtown and the growth that way, and just keep going forward as with our town, and especially we have such a beautiful historic downtown and a gorgeous waterfront. And I think all of us coming together and supporting each other and seeing what people's needs are as we keep growing.
All right, great. With growing regulations at all levels of government, whether it's the city or the county or the state or whatever, the regulations at all levels of government negatively impact local businesses, some more than others. What would be your approach to helping businesses succeed in Port Orchard? So that's a little bit different spin on the last question. The last one was just impact, but what can the city do to help businesses succeed?
Well, I think, and I touched on this in the previous answer, but I think part of it is understanding the city's role, what it can and cannot do. I think understanding the bookends between that is really important. I also think that having good infrastructure in place helps businesses succeed. And that includes efficient infrastructure. And so traffic can be one of those. And making sure that we are as good a shape as we can be. Let's see, I've taken some notes. I think we can look at maybe trying to incentivize some development, maybe mixed use development. I think that there's some opportunity to look at code. One of the things that the pandemic has shown is that more and more people are working from home. So how can we incentivize home businesses? How can we incentivize cottage developments? And so those are some of the ideas that I've thought about. I've talked about the barriers of permitting and making sure that we've got streamlined staff and business toolkits. Also making sure that access to real-time data for businesses is important. And I think you understand that probably better than most. And then one of the things that is kind of interesting in Port Orchard is we don't have much of an industrial area. We don't have a lot of industrial zoning. And if there is an opportunity to expand that in the future, I think that's worth considering. Not that we want, or maybe we do, that's part of a discussion, but we've got to figure out what is it that we really want in terms of our commercial and our industrial uses to look like. Making them succeed. So one of the things that I've thought a little bit about, and this ties into improved outreach for the city, is how we can message things better. And it's not just messaging necessarily, the boring sausage making, the policy issues that the council does, but also some of the other key issues that maybe the business communities are facing or are promoting. And I've got some ideas I want to talk about with the council on that as well.
All right, super. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
All right. Heidi, the next question here is deals with businesses also. And obviously, I'm going to say from a business standpoint, that growing regulations at all levels of government are negatively impacting local businesses. What would be your approach to helping businesses succeed in South Kitsap?
Yes, good question. And I think to slow down the impact fees, they are so high for businesses. And that is with the city and even the county. And I think that needs to be looked at because businesses are going through a hard time right now. There's an inflation going on and everything costs money for everybody, not just businesses, but family households. And so I think that should be tapered and definitely not add on to another sales tax by any means. And I heard that was talked about one time in city council, put the sales tax higher. No, I don't agree with that one at all. And I think we really need to work with and be in business friendly. Talk to businesses. What do they need? How can how can the city help with them and listen to them and help them to go forward in their business, and because they've lost a lot too. And we want to be supportive with the small businesses. And also, I think the city council is looking at COVID restrictions and mandates. That has no part to be in right here in South Kitsap. We are a small community. We like to listen to each other. We want to be there for each other. And I think putting restrictions on businesses for mandates will just hurt them even more. So I'm not for those at all. If, it should be an individual choice for the business, but don't have city council dictating what businesses should do.
All right, so now we are at the grand finale, the last question, the last big question. I said the first question was tough, but this may be even tougher. But this is an opportunity for you to blow your own horn and talk about yourself, because this question is, why are you the best choice for city council for the city of Port Orchard?
I do believe I'm the best choice because I have an ear to listen. I'm coming on this for the right reasons, to be in, going out to be in leadership and for the city council, your first priority is the people, to be a voice for the people. And that's exactly why I'm coming out. I want to listen to them. I want to listen to the businesses, my constituents. I feel like I have the ability to compromise and work together. I own my own daycare business for 32 years. And I definitely worked with all kinds of parents and children. And I'm also reliable and dependable and trustworthy. And those are words from Mrs. Emmons. She was one of my daycare moms. And all those 32 years, I have never called in sick or even pretend I was sick so I didn't have to go to work. I was always there. And that's where I come in, to be reliable and dependable. And also I want to hear, we are growing fast. And I feel like I need to be in leadership to really get the answers and to understand stuff. It's hard to sometimes understand stuff if you're on the outside. And I want to definitely be a part of our growing community and our historic community, and add even more historic, information downtown, and with our community center. And a big thing too is the walkway. I do have to talk about that, and that's not always a comfortable situation or to bring up. Now, I'm definitely for a walkway. Lots of people want that, but I think at the expense of what the city wants to do is, I think that's going to put us under with the money, because it's going to cost so much. I mean, we got power poles to move, we got homes to take down, we got businesses to destroy, and I think we can compromise on a walkway. You can still have a walkway, and it's not that bad of traffic to walk across right where it goes around the corner. There's some beautiful grass right there, and that land's going to waste. Put a chair and a table there. Let it be like a lookout, and have lunch there, and then go along the right-hand side and then cross back over. I love the crosswalks that have lights. You just push a little button, and they're solar paneled, and they blink, and you can see them really well. So I think that's something to talk about. And we haven't talked about that as a community for a really long time. And there's just a lot of stuff that I would love to be, working with the people on, working with head departments on, and making sure that we have transparency, accountability, and definitely fiscal responsibility.
All right, Scott. So coming up here, I have got what some may think is the toughest question of all. And for some, it may be a little bit easier. It's an opportunity to blow your own horn. And the reason I say it's tough is because a lot of people don't like talking about this. But why do you think you are the best choice for the Port Orchard City Council?
Okay. Well, I've been doing it for 30 years, and I've been proud of my record. I've always been transparent. I know that that's a question people have about the city in general, I guess. I feel like conversations and emails should be of the nature that, should you read about it or see a copy of it printed in the newspaper, you should be okay with that. That's been kind of a guiding principle of mine, is that you got to be above board and transparent. I mean, in my, and I've mentioned this, and it's kind of crazy and it doesn't have a lot of support, but in my dream state, if a member of the public wanted to be able to access all of your emails, except for the legal and the confidential personnel matters, that kind of stuff, they could easily. We don't have a system like that. You have to file a PDR. But in my dream state, if you wanted to go and see what people were saying, and I preserve a record of my emails, I try and communicate through emails, you could. So I feel like I am really transparent. I also feel like I'm really accessible. I've responded to emails, sometimes, to the dismay of others, and probably sometimes, honestly, when I shouldn't have, because it involved a legal matter and I didn't break any rules, but you're really supposed to maintain a firewall during those. But for the most part, I've been pretty spot on my communications. I'm very accessible. I respond fairly quickly. again, in an email, just to preserve the record. And so I believe I'm very accessible. I also believe I have a good understanding of how the city works. I began my planning career in Alaska working for a city. I became the director of planning working for a city. I reported to a city manager and the council members, and then came here and began making recommendations to commissioners. And so I really understand what it's like and what is needed and expected of those policy recommendations. And for the last 6 years, I've been on the other side of the aisle where people are making staff recommendations to me. And I understand what it takes to make those recommendations, the work that it goes in to making those recommendations. I understand what it takes to run a city. To suggest that we don't need contractors or consultants and we shouldn't have lobbyists is not a reality. It would sink the city. We would be essentially gifting everybody around us those monies, and it's not real. And then again, the thing that brings most people out, except for pandemic these days, is land use issues. And I've got a really good understanding. I've led long range planning efforts. I've led current planning efforts. I currently lead current planning for the county. And I understand how all that works. I do want to point out that there's been a recent mention of a conflict of interest. I think if anybody were actually search the record or talk to the clerk, they would see that I have recused myself from every possible county conflict to the point where I've stepped out of the room or those executive sessions. So, if the city is appealing a current planning project of the county, and there's actually one of those underway right now, I'm firewalled off from that. I don't even know what's going on the county level, much less the city level. So that's an example of, my integrity. And I also feel like I'm pretty fair in listening to people. I feel like I'm in touch with people. Again, I've doorbelled over 620 homes. And I feel like I've been pretty spot on. I've learned a couple things. I've learned that there's a lot of people who just are not interested. And so the challenge of in front of the council, one of them anyways, under continuous improvements, is how do we get people interested? And I'm going to be talking about some neat ideas, I think, real soon. And it's a variation of some old ideas. And frankly, a lot of this stuff is, right? We've just gone to an electronic format versus a paper or a mailed format or a newspaper format. So I think my land use experience, plus just my general experience with planning communities for 30 years and working in government, and how I support continuous improvement and making sure that we have a balanced budget, and that we listen to people. It's important to understand that not infrequently, I won't say quite often, but maybe fairly often, there are winners and there are losers in decisions. You cannot make everybody happy, and you have to have a thick skin about that. But you also have to realize that you made a decision using our guiding principles, which I'm proud of. I think we did a really good job in adopting those guiding principles. But you made a decision that considered the facts, considered the legal risks, considered those principles, considered whether it's supported by the comprehensive plan, and is fiscally responsible. And so all those things, I think, can weigh in on a decision, and I do a good job considering those things. When I first showed up, one of the very first things I asked that we do, and when we implemented it, is with all the staff reports, show the linkage to our comprehensive plan, our city's master plan, because that is the most transparent document you can go to see what the city is planning on doing with Parks and Rec, its land use, with its 6-year capital improvement program, with its 6-year transportation improvement program. And so now you've seen this. We've got staff reports, and it shows there's a section that talks about the appropriate comprehensive plan, goals, and policies that are supported by that. So anyways, it's been my experience. It's what I've been doing for 30 years, and now I'm just on the other side of the dais on that. And the other thing is, I said it at the beginning, I really do love Port Orchard. Its location could not be better. I argue that we are in a better location to what I like to do than Bremerton. I plan on being here for a while. So you know, I'm fighting for the city. I'm fighting for our population. I'm fighting for our traffic.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so that wraps up our questions here. But I want to one more time thank you for joining me today. Thank you for stepping up and being on the city council and continuing to volunteer your time and working towards the good of the city. I want to thank Heidi also for stepping up, because it's not an easy thing to do. And there is a steep learning curve for everybody, and it's going to be an uphill battle for the city, you know, going forward.
Can I say one thing? I think regardless of who lands in these seats, the next 4 years are going to be a really exciting time.
Right.
The community event center will get its wheels under it with the Kitsap Bank moving, traffic improvements, and then our comprehensive planning, making sure the event center and any other new development works well with the existing development. It's going to be, these next 4 years are going to see some changes that Port Orchard hasn't seen in recent history.
Right.
So whoever lands, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Next 4 to 8 years, really.
And that's what I meant. You know, I didn't, by uphill, I didn't necessarily mean a bad battle, but there will be a lot of changes coming down the pike.
A lot of challenges.
You know, as we emerge from the pandemic, and hopefully people will take to the streets once more, and we get our life back to normal. There's a lot of things that will be great coming up for the city and for the community overall. So
yeah.
Thanks again, Scott. And I want to encourage everybody. We are about a week and a half away from the election. Ballots are due on November 2nd. So make sure you vote. Get your ballots in early if possible. And with that, I want to leave with my my final words as always to shop local and love local. So thanks, Scott, and thank you, Heidi, and have a great day.
Thank you, Matt. I sure appreciate the opportunity. Take care.